When I tell people that I make hundreds to thousands % ROI on my land deals, their jaws hit the ground. Any other business, 100% ROI seems like a moonshot. How are we able to get those kinds of returns over and over again? One word, arbitrage. As land investors, we know how to leverage asymmetries that give us an advantage when negotiating with sellers and buyers. While we often do this intuitively, there's actually science behind it. In today's episode of the Land.MBA Podcast, we're going to go deep on 4 different inefficiencies that you can take advantage of to pay less and charge more for your properties.
Welcome to the Land.MBA Podcast, where we go deep into the business of land investing.
Welcome to Connecticut.
Thanks for having me, Howard. It's a good time so far. Nice weather.
It has been incredible weather.
Decent food.
Well, you've had a great chef.
Marginal company. But,
Well, don't speak about my son that way.
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of mean. He's only 12.
No, Dave's here. We've been having a blast, working hard and playing hard and seeing the great state of Connecticut. Not necessarily a place I would invest for or suggest for land investing, but a great place to live. So we were just joking earlier because I am the kind of guy who has a reputation for negotiating at Walmart. And I do like a deal. And as anybody who knows me knows, but when it comes to investing, it actually can be quite a bit more detailed than that. I mean, there's actually models and intellectual models and analytical models for pricing, and we do a lot of this, I think, intuitively all the time. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we kind of really broke down pricing in the sense of how do you get better prices vis-a-vis your sellers and your buyers? Why are you getting lower prices, and how can you try to make it a little bit more scientific so that you can get better prices more often? So this episode may get a little bit deep, but at Land.MBA, we go deeper. It's what we do. So Dave, how's your pricing been?
Yeah, that's right. My pricing on my sell side or my buy side?
Exactly.
It's very good. This is a really interesting topic. Howard found an article and started breaking it down, and we started discussing it, and was like, a lot of that stuff we actually apply subconsciously, but reading some of the key points in this article, you can break it down to, various behavioral and analytical inefficiencies, to name a couple. And there's a lot of examples of those. But, blanket question as to how my pricing is, or
yeah. So, well, I mean, you're getting good deals. You're making good money. You're making like a sale a day. These days. It's ridiculous. Pretty jealous about that.
Well, I didn't know about I sold anything last week, but this week's been pretty good.
Oh, I didn't sell anything yesterday. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I did. A good one too. Well, so I mean, the thing I always say is that, like when you select a county, one of the things I look at, the first thing I typically look at is activity. There has to be some good activity around raw land, because if there's not, nothing we're going to do is going to change that. I mean, we need buyers.
Yeah, no matter how cheap you buy it,
it doesn't matter what. Yeah,
if there's no demand, then
that's right.
It's going to take you a while to sell it.
But the second thing I'm really interested in is, who are those buyers? Because if all of those buyers are locals, that's not a good scenario for us as land investors, because they're going to understand the value of the land better than we will. And our business is predicated upon having an information advantage over both buyers and sellers with regards to price.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're going in and trying to buy, off making the kind of low offers that we typically make, and what's the old expression in business is you want to you want to position yourself so that you have an unfair advantage wherever you can, right? And if you're, maybe haven't done enough research and or the sellers live in the county, they're very familiar with the area, they're going to have an unfair advantage over you, for you trying to buy it and get a great deal. Hence, probably won't get that many deals in that county. But that leads down, all kinds of rabbit trails. Well, should I, do out-of-state owners, blah, 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 blah. And, the downside with that is, depending on where, there may be a very small percentage of out-of-state owners or out-of-area owners. That's out of, I don't want to go spend too much time on this part, but if you're talking out-of-state, for example, the further east you go, you don't have to go very far to be out of state.
Well, we're in Ridgefield, Connecticut. The next town over is New York.
Right.
So out of state won't necessarily get it. But I mean, if I live in Denver, Colorado, I could be a 5-hour drive and I'm still in Colorado.
Right. So out of state's relative. But, the further away from the property, the less they're going to know about it. The more detached they typically are. Maybe they've owned it for a long, long time and only visited it once. Those, that's going to get your best outcome. But let's talk about some of these inefficiencies.
Yeah. Well, so what we're really trying to do, I think, is we're trying to create an arbitrage.
Yes.
Right. So an arbitrage is where, we think about it in terms of investing, is where we can get something cheaper or less expensively than what we think is the true value of it. And that usually happens for a short duration because the market eventually figures it out and closes the gap. But as long as that arbitrage is maintained, we can make a spread. And so what drives an arbitrage? And so we've kind of reduced it down to 4 what we call inefficiencies. So that we're going to talk about today. So the first one are behavioral inefficiencies. The second one are analytical inefficiencies. Third one are informational inefficiencies. And the fourth one are situational inefficiencies. So let's just take these one at a time. So the first one may be the most prevalent out there, which is behavioral inefficiencies. But they are not necessarily the easiest to convert into advantage. But they're always there because even though the world changes and circumstances change, the human nature doesn't change very much. And so a lot of it is built upon what behavioral scientists or behavioral economists would call biases. We have these different kinds of biases. So first of all, what is behavioral inefficiency? So behavioral inefficiencies are when people behave in a way that causes price and value to diverge, and they're when we say people behave in a certain way, it's usually built on these different kinds of biases. So, we've got, let's just take a couple of them here. So there's something called a default bias. So Dave, you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think that is probably one of the most common biases that enables us to create an arbitrage with people who, what that means is, people pick the easiest option. Just, they want to avoid complex decisions and they don't want to deal with it. For example, where Ma and Pa bought the property 30 years ago and, they never did anything with it. Pa's not around anymore. And Ma gets our letter and offering her, a couple of grand for their property that, she may know it's worth 10 or 15 or 20,000, but she's done and checked out. And she's like, yeah, this is easy. Here you go.
That's it. And so it's about our job is to make their life super, super easy so that they can just say, whatever, I just want to be done with it. Right? Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes, so in our conversations with sellers, we might want to help them understand how complicated not working with us might be. So we might talk about, well, of course, if you want to get full market price, you could work with a realtor. You're going to have to negotiate them. They're going to want an exclusive. They're not going to put a lot of time and effort into it because, it's too small of a deal for them. They're not going to make that much money on it. So they'll throw it out there, usually with a price that's too high to make it look good, but it's not going to move because they're not doing any real marketing on it. And then they're going to take, if it does sell, they're going to take their chunk of change against it as well. So maybe you're going to sit on it for 6 months and a year, and maybe you'll make a little bit more, who knows? But I mean, it's going to be a real long slog versus I'll put money in your pocket in 2 weeks.
Exactly. So it's sort of, you could, not to jump ahead, but you can compare that to when you're selling also. It's either price or terms.
Right. Exactly. So the first one, default bias. People want to pick the easiest option versus the most complex. All right. Second one, what do we call it? The
endowment effect.
The endowment effect.
It's when people tend to overvalue what they own. And it's really, it's a behavioral inefficiency because it's typically emotional. It's not typically backed by any data. They just think that because they bought it 20 or 30 years ago, that real estate naturally appreciates just, by osmosis.
This bit me in the butt when I first started land investing. I did this absolutely massive, ridiculous analysis of every county in the country. And I ranked every county in the country from 1 to 3,114 based upon my analysis. And I said, all right, I'm going after county number 1. This looks like the best county for land. It was a county down in Florida. And I mailed to it, nada, nothing. And the problem is that I looked at the data. I figured out what market-based pricing was. I made my offers 20 cents on the dollar. But all of these people had bought this land speculatively prior to 2008. They spent too much for it. And even though I was offering them a reasonable price based on current market conditions, emotionally, they just couldn't take the loss.
Exactly. And I think that happens, to some degree on every mailer. Do you know how much I paid for this? And I've paid the taxes on it all these years and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Cry me another river. It's like, sorry.
What will the market bear?
Holding on to it's not going to get you any more money. It hasn't appreciated for 30 years. It's only gone down. So in the next 20, I don't see much change.
But, if you want to hold on to it and wait for it to go down another 50%, that's your business.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it's the case. I get saddened sometimes with some of the people that I speak to because they really got taken to the cleaners.
Is it just me, or is it getting harder and harder to count on a job for our financial security? Who would have ever believed that we would go from the lowest unemployment in 50 years to 40 million people unemployed? Whether you have a great job and want to create a second income, or you're recently unemployed, you need to check out Land.MBA, your one-stop shop for land investors. Investing in vacant land is a proven business model that can help you build a reliable and scalable second income. Imagine a business where you love what you do. There's no limit on how much money you can make. You can operate your business from anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And best of all, you can never be fired or downsized. If this sounds good to you, Land.MBA provides everything you need to get your business up and running and delivering income quickly. You get education, an end-to-end video course and optional coaching to help you get started faster and turn your energy into income. You get tools so you can automate and outsource the busy work and stay super organized. You get access to a thriving community of like-minded investors, which is a powerful way to share best practices and develop potential partnerships for growing your business. And finally, you get access to deal financing, so you never have to pass on a great investment opportunity due to limited funds. Our team has over a decade of real estate investing experience and has the knowledge and experience you need to help navigate any investing scenario. And with Land.MBA, we hold nothing back. Because there are no upsells, you get access to all of our combined knowledge right out of the gate. So don't wait to provide your family with financial freedom. Sign up today for Land.MBA's Soup to Nuts Land Investing video course. Just go to courses.land.mba and use coupon code FREEDOM to get 25% off. That's courses.land.mba and coupon code FREEDOM. And let us help you say goodbye to your JOB and hello to financial freedom. Okay, the next one, hyperbolic discounting. And that is people what that means is people put an overly high value on the here and now and an overly low value on the future. So it's basically a real formal way of saying, money today is worth more to me than money tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which makes sense with the time value of money as well. But it's not just about that's really the result of inflation and things like that. This is basically saying that people have this weird bias in their mind, thinking that something is worth more today than it will be worth
that a
in
little
the future.
bit. So getting a little bit today is
better.
Beats waiting for tomorrow. One in the hand versus two in the bush.
Which gets back to that whole argument of, I could put the money in your pocket in 2 weeks, but if you want to wait 6 months or a year for a realtor, knock yourself out. Well, right. People don't, they don't see the value in that. So I think this idea of quickness can be very, very compelling, but it's got to be done in the right way.
And, by that same thinking, if you're trying to offer value in, look, I'm going to close in a week, I'm going to close quickly for cash, but this is the price I need to do that for. If they can't get down to that price, then you can, my backup many times is, if there's still arbitrage in the deal, but not enough for me to pay cash for it, but to do an option or to do a long close, I guess for 180 days to close, then I come back with that after I've exhausted my cash buying techniques. Maybe I'll let them sweat for a day or two and then call them back and say, there's one more option. Let's say I'm trying to get it for 6 or 7 and then they can't get below 10 grand. I can do the 10 grand, but that's outside of our cash policy. And I'll do that if you give me 180 days to close. And, I'll do that all day long and go pre-market it. And so, maybe I only make 5 or 6 grand on that deal instead of 10, but I had no risk because I double closed it. So
the last one we're going to talk about here is these behavioral inefficiencies is loss aversion. So this has been shown over and over and over again in experiments and studies, but people will try harder to prevent losing something than they will to make a gain. And so for example, let's just say that I'll give you $100. Let me see if I can make this example right. I'll say, here's $100. I give somebody $100, and I say, now, over the next week, I need you to do X, or you've got to give me the $100 back. Well, they're going to probably do it because they have the $100. It's in their hand or in their wallet, and they don't want to give it back. But if I flip that around and said, you do all this work and I'll give you $100, maybe they'll do it. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll hang out and watch a football game, go to the bar, hang out with their wife, do whatever. Oh, I forgot. People will work harder not to lose something than they will to gain something. And it's been proven over and over and over again. And so, you can actually use this, I think, when you're buying properties, if you word things the right way. Now, obviously, we're saying, you sell me the property, I'm going to give you money. That sounds like a gain situation.
Right.
But if you were to say, look at, the market is very unclear right now. We got an election coming up. We got COVID-19. I'm talking to investors all over the place, and they're not making any investments until after the election, and they know what's going on. So I can do this deal for you at this price right now, but if you don't do it now and you wait, the economy could take a massive turn for the worse, and you're not going to get this kind of money a second time around.
Right.
And now I'm kind of positioning it like they're going to lose out if they don't take my deal.
You're creating urgency with that aversion to loss too. So it's urgently. Let me just clarify a little bit about the statement there, because right that statement about investors holding on until after the election. It's not necessarily applying with land right now. We're right at the beginning of September here, but it certainly is with other asset classes like apartments and things. We've been chatting with some people regarding those asset classes. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, it actually is happening today. It's just not so much in our market, but nobody knows that because nobody's living in this space day in, day out like we are, in the community. So they don't know that. All right, let's move on to the next inefficiency, which is analytical inefficiency. And what that means is that it's an efficiency that arises when all the participants have access to the same or very similar information, but one person on this one side of the negotiation has a much better ability to analyze that data than another. So an example would be, let's just say you were working in a county where the assessor has fantastic data and the historical sales data is available to anybody who wants to access it. So how do we use that? How do we get an advantage because we can analyze the data or use the data better than somebody else can?
Right, because we might both have access to the same data or similar data, but one of us is trained and one of us is not.
And one of us has tools and one of us doesn't.
Right. So, for example, I'm sure you've all heard this when you've talked to a seller. Well, I looked on Zillow and I can see these properties are going for, $20,000. Why should I take your offer for $6,000? And well, first of all, what does going for mean? You mean it's listed for sale, but it's been on the market for 1,000 days. Right. If I list my property for $1 million, does that mean they're going for $1 million? So that's the untrained eye that is not able to extrapolate the data and understand the data. So
each of you are kind of arguing in the negotiation as to what is true market value. And they're looking at maybe one or two data points that they're pulling out. And of course, they're going to cherry pick ones that are going to be favorable to their side. Mm-hmm. And then we, as the professionals, are going to say, well, look, I've done an analysis based upon 400 comps, over the last 2 years in this area, and looking at all the specifics. And, from my vantage point, this is what the property is worth. And I'm happy to share many of those comps with you so that you can see that I'm not making this up. But the bottom line is not only do we have access to the data, but if you have good tools like, say, Price Boss, then you can take all that data and turn it into useful information. And, one of the ways you could do that, and that's for generalized pricing. But you could even go deeper. You can say, all right, well, based upon this data, I'm going to weight different things differently. So, maybe you've got road access. Maybe you don't have road access. Maybe you've got water frontage. Maybe you don't have water frontage. Right. Maybe you've got hills and trees. Maybe you don't have hills and trees. And so based upon that, we can make all of our adjustments to say, we feel very confident that this is the true market value. And it'd be really hard for the average person to argue with you. Yeah. Because frankly, we're the pros. We've got the comps. We've got the tools.
Yeah. And I mean, even down to zoning as well. Zoning can make a big difference depending on the area.
I'll give you a couple of metaphors, like, take tennis as an example. So in tennis, if you're playing with somebody, let's say a professional versus a weekend warrior, you're playing on the same court. You may be playing with equal quality rackets. It's the same sets of rules, but one side has more skill and is able to react faster and has a better strategy. So you're using all of the same situational kind of things, but one guy is able to, just slam you on the score because he's got,
he's the pro.
He's the pro. Another thing is like when you play poker, if you want to make a lot of money, you go find easy games where you've got a better skill than everybody else. Sometimes that's hard unless you can, because if people know you're that good, they may not want to let you in their game. But if you do, then, you're playing the same game with the same odds, with the same cards and the same chips at the same table, but you're bringing more skill and more ability to analyze situations and then act upon that. So So analytical inefficiencies.
Sure.
One of the other things is time. So so people, when they feel that they're under a time crunch, it's a stress. It creates stress.
Yep.
So, and when we're under stress, that naturally makes people shorten their time horizon. They don't think long term anymore. So it really comes down to that distress thing. How distressed are they? If they're more distressed, then they're going to be under more stress, which means the time element's going to matter more, which means, well, if it's got to be done quicker, we can do it for less.
Absolutely. Make time your friend. If you can sense that somebody is it has a need and they would be incentivized to avoid loss to get that money quicker versus waiting to get more money. That's when you're going to be able to get a better deal. It comes a little bit back to that analogy that I had before with when you offer an option or a long close. Hey, you've got, I can do it. This is my price if you want it quickly. Otherwise, my price is lower. My price is higher, but you're going to have to wait longer for the money. I actually had a long closed or option deal that I did a long time ago. In fact, I was pretty new. And so I don't remember the numbers, but I had it under contract for X. And I got an offer. It was actually 2 properties from the guy. I got offers on the properties that were a little lower. I would have still done the deal. They were a little bit lower. So instead of just settling for the arbitrage that I had already negotiated, I went back to the people, the original sellers, and said, "Hey, look, because I think I had 180 days, and this was like after 45 days or something like that, a short period of time that I had a buyer." I went back to the original seller and said, "Hey, look, I've got an opportunity to move these properties, but it's at a little bit less number. If you can come down," so it was really splitting the difference from the original. "If you can come down a little bit, I can get you paid right now. Otherwise, it's not quite enough juice in these. I'm going to have to put them back on the market." And so they did it, and everybody was happy.
There you go. You find out what people, what they really care about in those situations when you actually put them in an A/B kind of situation.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Sold hard cash. You want it now, or you?
It's amazing how hard cash motivates me. That motivates me. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Third inefficiency, informational inefficiency. So we just talked about analytical, where we're kind of all playing with the same information, but we have better analysis. But wouldn't it be better if we just had better information? Well, that certainly happens a lot because there are many counties where you're not getting that great data from the assessor. And so you have to find other ways to get the data. So maybe we're getting it from Data Tree, or maybe we're getting it from Lands of America or Zillow, or wherever we're getting it from. Again, it helps to have a good tool so you can get all this information in and easily process it. So like one of the things we do with Price Boss is you can pull in both sold comps and for sale comps. Well, as David mentioned earlier, the for sale price isn't necessarily what's going to actually be the final sales price. It's just what they're asking for. So you can make an assumption and say, well, I think the actual sales price is going to be is discounted 20% below the asking price. So you can just put 20% into Price Boss and it'll adjust all of the prices just for the for sale properties. It doesn't do anything to the sale properties because those are real comps.
Right.
And so it just makes it really easy. And then it gives you all of your comps with these are the acreage and this is the price. And therefore this is the price per acre. Makes it a kind of an apples to apples comparison. And then, the helps you analyze it and figure out your pricing. So, and you can, so if the data is not coming from the assessor, the average Joe, whether on the sell side or the buy side, they don't have access to it, but you do. You still can pull a lot of comps and really figure out market data.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you've got a massive arbitrage opportunity.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you know better than they do.
Sure. Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a matter of paying attention. I mean, maybe the data is in the assessor, but they don't know to look at the assessor.
Yeah, they have no idea.
So the bottom line is you have access to it and they don't.
Yeah.
So that gives you an advantage.
Yep, for sure. And what's this one? See more. Data is not information. The person who can convert the data into information better or faster has the advantage.
And that's right. I mean, so you could always pull out single data points, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but this property sold for X, or that property sold for Y. And I actually, you can, and we can do that too. We can use it to our advantage. So, I might, offer the price based upon what I understand market pricing to be. And then I will give them selected comps. If I'm buying the property, I'm giving them selected comps
on the low side.
But if I'm selling it, I give them selected comps on the high side. In both cases, it's perfectly honest. I'm pulling real comps, not making anything up. But I get to pick and choose the data that I want to share, because data is not information, and single data points don't give you the big picture, but they can be used to tell a story if you need it to.
That's right. And, coming back to those single data points, I mean, that's why we use median instead of average when we're compiling our comps, because you're going to have outliers. And unless you're manually removing those outliers, which you can do, and take the average, but that's why we use the median. So it kind of just takes the stuff in the middle, near the center line, and it's going to get you kind of the best.
Well, we should maybe just find that term, because a lot of people struggle with this. What's the difference between median and average? So average is, let's say I've got 100 comps, and I've got a price per acre for each of them. So I've got to kind of reduce it to an apples to apples comparison. So average would mean I add up all 100 of those, and then I divide by 100 and say the average price per acre is this. And as Dave said, if you've got any outliers in there that don't make any sense, like, most properties are selling for, $3,000 to $5,000 an acre, but this one sold for $100,000 an acre, it's skewing that average massively.
Yeah.
A median simply says at this point, half of the properties are higher and half of the properties are lower. And that's the point in the middle. And so that actually is a much more useful information, a piece of information, if you want to say, okay, what do these 100 comps actually mean to me?
Exactly.
All right. We're getting here towards the end. I know this is really heavy stuff.
Before we get there,
yes,
we must say one word or some words about our sponsor, LandSpeed.
Hey folks, my name is David Van Steenkist, and I've been a real estate investor for over 10 years. I've used lots of different tools, but none of them has done for my business what LandSpeed does. LandSpeed covers every step in the land investing process, from ordering mailing lists to marketing, sales, and closing the deal. What I really like, though, is it anticipates my needs. When I think, I wish I had a quick and easy way to evaluate return on investment on a potential property, look no further, LandSpeed does it. If I want to edit a deed after LandSpeed creates it, it can do that too. Most systems just stick you with a PDF that's uneditable, and you got to go back into the system and edit the fields and do whatever you need to do, and it's a real pain in the rear end. LandSpeed simplifies it. If I want to send 1 or 5 or even 40 neighbor letters at the click of a button, bam, LandSpeed does it. But even with all that inherent capability, you get access to LandSpeed Community, you get weekly mastermind calls, and you get the best mailing rates in the business with no volume commitment, which is freaking awesome. Because if I just want to top one contract to somebody, I don't have to pay $1.50. I still pay the bargain basement rate. And on top of that, customer service is stellar, quick, and they just do a great job. I've been very, very happy, very pleased with it. And look, I've been running my business on LandSpeed for over 2 years. So take it from me. If you're serious about your land business, then check out LandSpeed at facebook.com/landbizautomation. That's land, B-I-Z automation. And if you want $100 off, tell them you heard it from me, David Van Steenkist, on the Land.MBA podcast.
All right, we are back with number 4 in our top 4 list of how to create arbitrage opportunities in pricing.
Situational inefficiencies. So we all know, right, that the whole point of this business is to send out a bunch of mail
lots of mail, so that we can find those few really distressed opportunities. If somebody is distressed, that is a situational inefficiency, right? They need to do something and they need to do it fast. And so price is less important to them than speed. We've covered that, concept many times on this podcast already. So basically, it can come in a lot of different ways, and it can come, frankly, on both the buy and the sell side.
Yeah.
So let's see. Anytime somebody needs to sell, and they're under the gun to do it for reasons that have nothing to do with the underlying value of the property, that would be a situational situation.
Yeah.
Right. So one might be because they're distressed because they've got a huge tax bill, and if they don't pay it, they're going to go to jail. Something like that, or they basically ran on hard times. They just need the money.
Or you might happen to have, even though we don't specifically target tax delinquents, they might be somebody who is tax delinquent, and they're running up against their redemption period. And so they're like, yeah, I'll take something for it instead of losing it.
Yeah. But it could also simply be that, they could be, much more sophisticated than that, and they actually have another opportunity that they really want to get into, but they don't have the cash on hand to do it. And so getting this cash out of this property would really facilitate whatever the other project is that they want to do.
I'll give you a great example, actually, of a deal that I did a couple of years ago with a guy, actually with Jay, who I bought all these other properties from, but I mailed a guy who did a lot of tax lien investing. And so he occasionally takes properties back. And he was sitting on 3 properties in an area that I like to work. And normally, he, as an investor himself, not necessarily a land investor doing what we do, but he knows the value of stuff. Normally, he probably wouldn't have sold those at the price he sold them to me for. But situationally, he had a tax bill coming up, and they didn't really have a plan for those 3 properties. And so I got a nice deal on them, and it fulfilled a need of his to, be able to raise a little bit of capital to pay the tax bill.
Absolutely. Some people, need to just borrow from Peter to pay Paul. It just happens in life.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're looking for those situations.
Exactly. Just sorry to interrupt again, but it's, let's say you're in a business selling widgets, and sometimes you need to, look at retail. Sometimes you need to just clear out inventory, and you're going to take a loss or take a minimal profit on some of your inventory so that you can free up the capital to buy more profitable stuff.
A lot of reasons why this can happen. So we're talking a lot about why, people may be distressed when we're buying properties. What about when we're trying to sell properties? Are there times when the buyer of the property has an urgency to buy that has nothing to do or little to do with the underlying value? I should say less to do with the underlying value.
Sure. Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier. And then, so if somebody's in maybe a 1031 exchange position.
Can you define that term?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what a 1031 exchange is, that is just the basic high level of it. It's a tax law that enables you to sell a piece of real estate and at least pay $1 more for that. Let's say you sold it for $300,000, that you need to buy that next property for at least $301,000, and you pay no taxes on the profit of that property. And it has to be, there's some rules about it being like kind property, and you have to do it within a certain time frame, et cetera, et cetera. But, if you've got, it's usually going to happen with higher end properties. It's not going to be something where it's, I just sold a piece of property for a piece of land for $5,000 or $10,000 and I want to do a 1031 exchange. It might be 50, 80, 100, couple $100,000 higher end properties. But because you have the time constraint on a 1031 exchange, you might have some customers there.
Exactly. If they have a time constraint, that's the key piece right there. Okay. So I have to move quickly, and I got to I got to invest this money or I'm going to lose the tax advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it may not be, the best negotiation of my life, I'm going to do it because it actually improves my situation.
Exactly.
So there you have it on the sell side too.
And, that actually just made me think of another thing on the buy side. Here's a tip. Look, if you guys run into people, I know somebody, actually one of my students did this successfully. I haven't run in this situation myself, but it gave me an aha moment when, my student actually taught me something. But when the client, the seller is facing a situation where, gosh, they're having a hard time justifying selling it for such a loss because they paid X for it so many years ago. Sometimes they might be in a position where they're not financially distressed. They just are not, they can't get their head wrapped around losing so much money. But if you come back to them and say, well, especially if it's towards the end of the year, you need any tax write-offs? Take the tax write-off on it.
Absolutely.
Especially if you can convince them that, look, in 30 years, the thing's only gone down. I don't see it come, rocketing back up anytime soon.
You get your best price now and get a tax benefit out of it.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So one last piece on the situational inefficiencies is competitiveness. So if you go, so as I mentioned at the beginning, arbitrage works for a little while until all other market participants come in and they use competition and they end up closing that spread that creates the arbitrage. So if you're investing in a county that's very, very competitive with lots of other land investors, they're always going to be closing down the spread on that arbitrage faster. I can tell you point blank, in places like Costilla County or places in northern Arizona, there's still money to be made. There's still deals to be had, but it's not like it was back in 2016. It's not, it's not the Wild West that it used to be in with, I was buying properties for $500-800 all the time and selling them for $5,000 all the time. Yeah. It's not like that now. But if you go find a place where you can invest where it's working, but other land investors are not aware of it yet, you have a window of opportunity to maintain that arbitrage much longer because of that situation. Yeah. And that's fantastic. All right. So shall we wrap this up?
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about 4 different kinds of inefficiencies that lead to arbitrage in pricing. So the first one is behavioral inefficiencies based on human nature. People don't always act rationally, and we can leverage that. 2, analytical inefficiencies. So we all have the same information, but we know how to analyze that information better and smarter in order to understand market values better than the buyers or the sellers do. The next one is informational inefficiencies. We've got an advantage in that we've got better information than they do. So we better understand what market values are. And then the fourth one, situational inefficiencies, where, and I was something I should have mentioned earlier. So situational inefficiencies depend upon the other side being distressed in some way or under the gun in some way. Well, it doesn't really work to our advantage if we don't know about it. Right. True. So this is why, when you are dealing with sellers or even buyers, that conversation that takes place is so important. Building trust in that conversation is so important so that it lowers the barriers and makes them willing to tell you things that they probably shouldn't be saying, because every conversation truly is a negotiation. Right. So we want to get them to speak and talk about their situation and their motivation so that we can understand what those situational issues are that we can leverage in the negotiation.
Exactly. So, well, this was kind of a technical topic, and hope that you all got something out of it. I learned a few things just in reviewing the article, and we put a lot of detail in the show notes. So feel free to grab that and review it yourself. And everybody have a great day. We'll chat at you next time.
See you next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode, had a bit of fun, and walked away with some actionable insights that you can apply to your business. Dave and I have got some great content and interviews planned. So don't forget to rate and review, and of course subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If we mention any interesting links or tools, you'll find them in the show notes. To learn more about Land.MBA, visit our website at, wait for it, Land.MBA. See you next time on the Land.MBA Podcast.